All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Line Your Own Pockets. I'm just going to kick this one off to Dave right away because he's been hard at work building something, and I think he built something pretty cool. We're going to talk. This one's going to be it's going to be a nerds only one. I think we're going to go a little bit into the weeds, but I know I- if you're listening to a podcast about systematic trading, you're probably a nerd anyway. So I'm sure you'll have a great time.
Yeah, so everybody loves market data, right? And dealing
Oh
with
yeah.
market data and pipelines about market data. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Um, so the first thing that you need to do when you use AmiBroker or use software, Python, you need to get market data.
Hmm.
And the question is, how do you do that? And so when you start back testing, that's fundamentally different than real time trading. So you have a few more options to be able to download market data and import it into whatever tool you're going to use for back testing. So I've been doing this for, I don't know, 20 years at least. And I know that there's a couple things that I run into that are annoying as you do this over time. So there's the initial part of the backfilling, figuring out how far you're going to go back, doing the initial backfill. As you start back testing there with the data you've backfilled, then over time that becomes a little bit older, and a gap forms from the last, from when you did your initial backfill and the data that's collected since then.
Hmm.
And it sort of sneaks up on you because it's harder and harder to do chart reviews as the data gets older and older. It's like it's you're sort of more out of touch with it as the most recent data gets older and older. So it's important to keep that in sync. And it's kind of the perfect thing where you really need a process for it because it 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 sneaks up on you that the data is older and older and you kind of put it off. And then by the time you get around to actually refreshing the data, you've forgotten how to do it. Right. There's
Hmm.
enough time has gone by. You're like, okay, well, what did I do again? How did I do it? I can't remember exactly. So I've got a very good process for dealing with that I want to go over today with you. So give me your thoughts, Michael.
Well, yeah, first of all, this is something that's very important, I think, for people who are maybe switching to Amy Broker to figure out. We've talked about this before, but when I switched over to Amy Broker, I just didn't know that this would be a thing at all. Norgate and Real Test just have they update every night, and I'm not thinking about it, and it just kind of goes back in. And when I picked up Amy Broker, I just didn't. I just figured, oh, there'd be something. I'd hit a button, and then the
Yeah.
data's there. But like we talked about it, because it's when you go intraday, you're amplifying the data by 360 times
Yeah,
for
maybe
every
more than
single.
that.
It gets nuts. Oh yeah, pre-market, post-market.
Yeah.
Things absolutely get insane. So this process is just way more important than you think, and this was probably the first. Well, you were there. I was sending you all caps Slacks messages all the time, but
Yeah.
probably like the first 3 weeks of my Amy Broker kind of journey was getting the data, getting the right kind of data in there. Different database, like some databases that are small that you can run things quickly on, and then some database that are large when you're feeling confident enough in your code that you want to go further back. And yeah, it's a lot to manage. And the only way I've been doing it, keeping up on this, which is probably the worst way ever, is just redoing the whole kind of database from scratch, right? Just
Oh yeah.
periodically clear
Yeah.
it and just go and re backfill the whole 5 years or so worth of data from the get go, and just kind of turn it on Saturday and, and
Oh
hope it's ready
yeah.
to go by the next time I need to use it.
Yeah. That's the hard way. And
Hmm.
I've gone through so many years of doing this, and so when I started doing this, the first thing I did was backfill with the IQ Feed plugin uh, in AmiBroker, and that's what I've used I used that for some time. I remember In my daily review, going back through some trades and then comparing to the back test, I saw some data issues. And this was years ago, and I went back and looked, and I realized that my back testing database was missing data. Like, there were gaps in there that were enough to where, okay, this it became a problem. It became a really high priority to fix this. And because you're backfilling thousands of symbols, the way the backfill works in AMA Broker is it's doing a historical request for every symbol, but it
Mhm.
also adds a level 1 feed that it's pulling data. So it's getting a quote feed also. So the idea is
Oh,
you
so
backfill once.
it's last bid and ask. It's pulling in.
Yes.
Ooh, okay.
So the idea is it's backfilling once, starting a level 1 feed where it's getting a trades list as they occur,
Hmm.
and then it's building the bars in memory and sort of backfilling in real time as you go. So that's the way it's designed to work. Now, if you're only backfilling and you don't care about real time data, you're kind of forced still to do those level 1 messages. And there's you can only have up to 500. You can buy more with IQ Feed, but by default, 500 is the limit. So once you reach that limit, your data basically becomes corrupted. It does some very strange things, and I can't figure out who is to blame, AMA Broker or IQ Feed. They can't figure out who's to blame. Of course, the other guy is the one that's doing the wrong thing. So as I was really scaling on my trading, this was a very important issue to me. And I was like, okay, I cannot have my backtesting database be corrupted or able to be corrupted at any point if I don't push the right buttons at the exact right moment. So I knew I needed a process that worked outside of AMA Broker to pull the data and import it into AMA Broker without a plugin connected to that database. So
Hmm.
that's what I've set up, and I have a utility that allows you to do that very, very efficiently.
Well, and the importance of that, because some people might say, "Oh, well, if it's just a back testing database, who cares if stuff's a little bit messed up?" But that could be the difference between a great system or something that's broken, or more importantly, when it comes to optimization, you might be optimizing for like completely
Yeah.
different standards, right? It's saying, "Oh, look at all these wicked trades that happened under this condition." That condition is just a phantom ghost inside the data and never actually happened. And then, yeah, you're back testing for that thing. And even like say the break happened somewhere in the middle. Well, all indicators are calculated off kind of a stream of data. So if you're missing 2-3 days here or something there, any moving average, RSI, MACD, ATR, whatever it is, that's just kind of completely bunk at that point. And so you're breaking more than just, oh, I'm missing a little bit of data, that'll be fine. I'll kind of estimate without it. But anything that flows through that data is busted as well.
Yeah. So it's a really important thing that data integrity, and I knew I needed a process to do it well. Now, the first tool I started using was a tool called Q Collector, and I was actually using eSignal at the time.
Hmm.
So this tool would allow you to download all the historical data into CSV files for every symbol. So, I mean, the other pain in the butt part for the backfill in AMA Broker using the plugin is, yeah, you see it go from 0 to 100%, but you don't really know that it's complete. Like, you assume it's complete,
Right.
but like I said, I went and found some holes in the data, so it was all of a sudden I realized I couldn't really trust that number when doing this.
Well, and how did you? Because this is one of those things where it's not like you're working on a spreadsheet of your household business expenses, right? And you can even kind of wrap your brain around the data. Like, how did you do the reconciliation to find it? Or were you just kind of going about your day to day operations and that's what noticed it? Because I just realized I don't really go back and comb through the data. I don't think really you
Yeah.
could manually in any sort of meaningful way.
So the only reason that I found out about it is because so I do a daily back test connected to the my real time database.
Hmm.
But every once in a while, I'll go do a larger back test based on my back testing database. This is like the true source of truth.
Hmm.
And I do a comparison on that. And that's where I discovered that the back testing database had some holes in it that weren't holes in real time. So there was enough differences there. I was like, holy crap. Like I've got to figure this out.
So let's drill in on that a little. Let's double tap on it, whatever business I'm trying to use the podcast term, but because some people might not know about this, or some people might not even do it, but with AmniBroker and with these databases, you got to think of it as that a short-term database is going to be relatively quick, and you can run tests on it relatively quick, and you can even use that as kind of your real time or whatever. And the process that Dave's describing is at kind of the end of every day, you should say, here's the trades I actually took, and then run a little back test on the smallest database that will allow all of your indicators and everything to calculate correctly, and say this is what actually took place. And the reason you do that on a different database, not like a master database, is the speed of it, right?
Yeah.
It's less data to compute. And then you have kind of the big boy over here, which you called the source of truth, and that's because it doesn't connect to the market very often. It is a huge amount of data that's usually left dormant. And then when you are really interested in learning more, you go and you tap that database because that might have 5-10 years of data in it and is just a longer term look back. But because it's that big of a database, you're not going to like have it update every bar, every candle bar or something like that, or you're using just an insane amount of compute. So splitting these, you're saying, small fast tasks I'm going to do on this database, and then big long ones I'm going to do on this database here. See what happened to my. You keep going. I'll figure out what happened here.
Yeah. So that's a fundamental thing you need to be able to do because back testing, you're not doing that in real time. It doesn't matter. You can do that on the weekend. You can do that after hours. And that's where you come up with your strategies. That's where you do your optimizations. You're preparing for the real time environment. And that in real time, it needs to be fast. You need to
Hmm.
generate the signals fast enough to actually be able to take them. Um, so yeah, they're fundamentally different environments and they're separate for precisely that reason, because you got limited resources, you need to generate these fast and it's just different environments.
Well, and even for real test, I do kind of the same thing where even though the database is the same because Norgate kind of manages the database and there's much less data in it, so it's not that as big of a deal. But I still have a file in which I run to generate the orders, and then a file in which I do the back test. And the only difference is the amount of data it imports before it has to go is a year versus 30 years of the
Mhm.
other one. So this is common for, I think, not just Andy Broker, but for everyone. Do you want to go fast, or do you want to have really a long runway of data? Because you can't do both, right? So you got to pick one.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was using this Q collector tool, this kind of a big GUI interface. You could say, okay, set up the symbol list, go backfill the symbol list. It would pull all the data down into CSV files. Uh, and then I would use those to generate a big old file that I would import into AmberBroker. Now, I did that for many years. It had a command line interface, so you could initiate it automatically. There were things I didn't quite like about it. Then, so I would email their support. And I think one time they wrote me back, but then they went dark. And it's like, okay, nobody's responding to this. That they're not open to making any improvements to the software.
Hmm.
Years and years went by. I was like, well, okay, I've still got access to it. The website's still there. Then the website disappeared. Now I don't have access to this tool. Um, then I was like, well, I've still got a local copy of it. I can still install it on a new machine. Then it stopped working with the latest version of Windows. So you literally can't bring
Mm.
the tool up anymore. So this is, it's like, wow,
So
okay,
that's
this is not
11
good.
versus 10? Is that like when they
I think it
required
was
when they
11.
retired
Yeah,
10?
I think so.
Yeah.
Um, so now I'm like, man, what do I do? And so that's when I talked to Trent about exploring their API because I wanted to recreate this tool and just release it.
Well, and for the
So
people, Trent is the works with I forget his official title with IQ Feed, and we actually had him on the podcast. So if you guys want to go back and listen to more of why these data feeds can be so complex, and we did a great job of kind of looking behind the curtain of we only see the front facing thing, which is the data, and that data better work, but we did a really good job of just with him understanding all this, diving deep back there and saying, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you don't realize that has to go on in order for you guys to get the data that you use every day.
yeah, that was a fun episode. You should definitely go back and listen to that. Um, so I was like, okay, I'm going to try to recreate this tool. Now, at first, I was thinking, well, I'm going to have to create this GUI. I don't really like creating GUIs. I'm more of a command line person. I've been doing that for years. Um, but I was thinking, well, I'll have to create a GUI for it. But then the more I started using Claude, and the more everybody else starts using Claude, the more these command line interfaces are back in vogue.
Hmm.
Like they're the cool thing now.
Yep.
They were cool for me back in 1997, but
All right,
now they're cool for
hipster.
everybody else. This is great. So I was like, I'll just make this a command line utility and
Hmm.
and have it all the documentation in the standard way so Claude can look at the help doc and see exactly how to use it. Um, so I was like, gosh, can I like here 2026, I'm thinking about releasing a command line interface utility. That's kind of crazy, but it seems like the right move.
Well, it's, when we were talking kind of offline there, I haven't myself, I don't think, opened up Realtest or AmiBroker in like weeks, because everything I'm doing is a scheduled task that the bot's doing, and it's all kind of command line. That might be a bit of an exaggeration, but I don't do it as much anymore. And I'm becoming more and more software agnostic, which is very interesting as well.
Yeah.
For example, I have these day trading strategies that I've been running using daily bars and real test for a long time, and they work, and they're great. But I wanted to do a little bit of a tweak to them for like profit targets. But with real test, when you only have daily bars, you can still do day trading with limit orders and things like that. But I want to get more granular on the data. So I had Claude go and grab, to speed up the process, is to grab the list of the names that were traded in that back test and put them in the AmiBroker, and then back test there and start to play a little bit more and more with the intraday data, and just showing that it's the way to do it now. Is if it's to the point where I would look at a software and be way more interested in buying it if it was run by the command line, so I don't have to do it.
I mean,
You
just
know,
think how big of a change that is. I mean,
yeah.
can you imagine 2 years ago or when we started this podcast, could you imagine you telling me that?
No, I still
Absolutely
don't know.
not.
I still don't know how it works. But yeah, and it's a complete 180. Whereas before, if it didn't have a GUI interface, I started dipping my toe into Real Test, because it was, when I looked it up, it was an easier scripting language to understand. Like there's, so I went from GUI to kind of easier scripting to like and now it's to the point where I don't care if you have a GUI interface. I'd like some sort of feedback, I guess, as a user to see kind of what's happening. But because the new GUI interface is just your voice, it's just right typing. That's the
Yeah,
new
yeah,
GUI interface.
yeah, yeah. So, so I've been working on this command line utility. I've got it working uh, in my pipeline and the way the data updates for my database. So
Hmm.
here's how it works. It's one exe file. You download it, you there's no install program, it's just a file, you put it where you wanna run it. Um, you
How very
create a
Mac
folder.
OS, just FYI. That's how, I don't know if you ever had a Mac, but that's just how they work on Mac. You just open them up and they
Yeah.
work. So very app like.
So you create a folder, put this in there. You create a folder for your data, and that's where all the CSV files are gonna be downloaded. So there's 2 modes for the IQ Feed version of this utility. One is the default, which is backfill. That's
Hmm.
gonna connect to IQ Feed, which is installed locally on your machine, and it pulls down all the CSV files for all the symbols that you want to download, and you tell it the bar size that you want. The default is 1 minute. You can use whatever bar size you want, including daily. And then you say, how far back
Did
do you want to
wait,
go?
did you add that like very reluctantly when you added the daily? Did you go, oh, daily?
No, but because I mean, there are reasons you might want to use that even in an intraday database. You can actually insert end of day data in an intraday
Mm.
back database in Amberbroker. So, but it also it's a different endpoint in the IQ Feed API. So to get daily bars versus intraday bars. Um, all right, so you specify how far back you want to go, and then you just hit enter, and it runs and downloads all those CSV files into this folder. So you've got, you know, spy underscore one.csv, which means the spy
Hmm.
1 minute bars. That's what that represents. CSV file. It's just a text file. So you can go look and see what it downloaded.
Okay.
Um, which it was another really important part of this process because there's no way to go back and see when you run a backfill and Amber Broker. You just can't see exactly what it's done without going through every symbol in Amber Broker, right? Like this
Hmm.
is just a much better way to audit what it's doing.
Well, yeah, that was what it stood out to me right away is because, yeah, with Amy Broker, you just kind of trust that when the progress bar is done and it says that it's backfilled everything, you go, cool, hope that worked, and then
Yeah.
you kind of move on with your life. So that's good.
So, all right. So now you've got a big old list of CSV files. It's going to be an immense amount of data. I mean, it's a lot of data that gets downloaded.
Hmm.
So that's the backfill phase. So nothing is in Amber Broker yet. It's just data in your CSV files that you can go look and see what exactly what happened. It keeps the log file. Then the next phase is the import mode. Same utility, you're going to run dash dash import.
Hmm.
It's going to, and you tell it the data directory that you created that has the CSV files, and it's going to go through and create one big import file from all that data that you can import in one fell swoop into a local database in Amberbroker, which is the important piece. You have full control over what data gets in there. And you can go back and see exactly what data goes in when you do it. You have full control over that. You don't have to worry about is the plugin disconnected?
Hmm.
Is wait for backfill selected? And is that going to take a whole bunch of long time to complete? So you get all your data in there in one fell swoop. The Now that's really good. But where it gets really excellent is the next time you run it. You run the same commands and it automatically figures out what it already has and only downloads the new stuff. So that's the backfill part. It's only going to request the new stuff. So if you ran a
So
backfill last
what
weekend, and you're
what are you
running it
saying?
again, it's only going to, like our spy example.
Yeah.
You've got data up until last weekend. You imported your data. Now you want to update it for the data since then. You go to run the backfill command. It's not requesting data back from 2017 or whatever you did it the first time.
Hmm.
It's gonna look at the CSV file and see, okay, I've got data since it's gonna look at the last line in that file, only gonna request the new stuff. So that's much, much faster.
Yeah.
And then when you do the import part, it knows the last thing you imported. So it's only gonna create a file only with the new stuff in it. So when you go to import it into AmaBroker, it's super fast.
This might be a dumb question, but why doesn't it work like that anyway? Like, it just seems like which means you built the right thing when the obvious answer is why isn't that the way it works anyway? But I just wonder why. And I think this is how Norgate does it, where it just keeps adding on to the database, but that just seems like the natural solution. So why wouldn't that be the default, the way AmiBroker or IQ Feed or whatever they do work that
Yeah,
way anyway?
it is the default in AmaBroker. So when you do a backfill, it is doing an incremental backfill. The problem is you can't really verify that it's complete. You run up against this 500 symbol limit because it's requesting a level 1 quote feed for every one of these when you don't really
Mm,
need it.
yeah.
And it's going up against your limit. And when it reaches that limit, your data is basically going to be corrupted, so you get out of that loop. Now, the other thing I realized as part of doing this is, all right, when you set up a database in AmaBroker now connected to IQ Feed, do you remember the important number that you're putting in there? Like, do you remember the setting that you have to put?
No.
So basically, you tell it how many bars are
Oh
going to
yes.
be in this
Yeah.
database.
Yeah. And yeah, I screwed that up a few times where I intentionally made like a really tiny database as opposed. And it always regardless what you put in, it always seems to pop up with a warning too, to saying this is going to be a big database. Are you okay?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's even this registry setting that to go get more to allow you
Hmm.
to put a bigger number in there. Now, think about that setting. So here's how it works. You put in, like, say, 1,000,000 bars, a million 1-minute bars. It's gonna go back, sounds like a lot, but it's not gonna go back super long, what, 10 years or something? I don't remember what the number is, but it's
Mm.
it's some amount of time. Think about how how the IQ feed works. You're requesting the most recent 1,000,000 bars per symbol. Now, what does that mean? Symbols trade a whole variety of different volumes, right? Some don't even trade in a day.
Yeah.
So what you get is in your AmaBroker database, when you do it this way, and it
Still have the
happens
one
to
feed.
work,
Yeah.
some of them, like Apple or the SPY's going back the least amount of time, but others are going back way further. Like you've got some going back to 2007.
Hmm.
So the start times for each symbol vary widely. So if you do a back test across all quotes, you get, maybe it starts back in 2007. There's only a few symbols in there, but over time there gets more and more and more symbols. At some point, like all the symbols are in there, so it becomes. But before that, it's kind of sporadic. It gets more and more sporadic as time goes on. This process says, okay, every symbol go back to this date. So the entire database is complete as of a specific date in time. So it's just a way better solution for this.
Geez, thunder. But yeah, I never thought of that at all because you're right. There's just a handful of symbols and you can find them periodically where if you look at the chart, it's just like a couple dashes every day. Even if you're on like a 5-minute chart, it's
Yeah.
just a dat because there's just one trade or two trades that happen throughout the day. So I didn't know that. I thought when you were requesting a time, it would be a request of that block if I want certain years. But you're saying that if there is no data, it will just keep going back until it finds something, or I guess there's the symbol didn't exist. Is that kind of the
So you're requesting a certain number of bars. You're doing
Yeah.
that across all the symbols, but what you're getting back, maybe you get a million bars for a lot of stuff, but the
Hmm.
start date to get a million bars is different for all the
Hmm.
symbols pretty much.
And then you're kind of wasting that usually because when you're going into AmiBroker to do a test, you're setting a window anyway. So you've just loaded in a whole bunch of data that's going to be outside. Like when I've got something that is called IQ 5 year and IQ 1 year, and I think IQ 6 months. So when I'm using IQ 5 year, I use the from to dates of around 5 years. But you're saying that there's data in that database that goes back,
Yeah,
useless data that probably goes back 10 years or longer.
exactly. So I've got a what I call a IQ feed diagnostics or a database diagnostics script
Hmm.
that's in AFL. And it does you can download it off the website. When you do that in your database, it'll tell you it's basically designed just for this to like, give me a snapshot of the database. What does it look like? It'll go through every symbol. You get one line per symbol. It says, what's the first date in the database for this symbol? Are there any gaps? So it's a
Mm.
pretty interesting report. But what the first thing you notice is, wow, okay, the first date for all these symbols are completely different. Like it's just all over the place.
And is that just affecting storage, or is that also affecting like processing power when I run a back test? Like, is it doing that part of it, or is it just extra useless storage?
Well, the way I think about it, it's kind of a sloppy way to set up the database because ideally you'd have one date that you know you can go back to and it's complete at that date. But
Mm.
the way it is now, you kind of pick a date that you think might be the right first date, or you just do it across all quotes and know that some symbols are going to come in 2007, but at some point it becomes complete. So you just sort of, you can't really, uh, you can't really rely on any decisions you make before a certain date because you know the data is just so scattered at that point.
This reminds me, back old school computers. Remember when you had to run like a disk defrag
Yeah,
periodically, and your computer would get twice as fast? And for you youngins, disks used to actually spin inside a computer. And every now and then, what would happen is you would have data fragmented on different parts of the disk. So every time you wanted to retrieve a file, it would have to actually spin a thing and go there and then spin a thing to go back. And so you'd run this utility periodically when your computer got slow, a disk defrag, and it would just like push all the data together so it wouldn't have to spin as much. And it was like all the data was there, but it was just in such a garbage way that it just made, and it was, these were the things back in the day that we had to worry about when your video game was running a little slow. First thing you'd bring up is the defrag tool and see if that fixed
that is so
anything,
funny.
made it go a little faster.
That is a good analogy. I can totally see why that reminds you of that. And you're dating us here, Michael. I mean,
I was about to say
when's the
they
last time you ran
they
a
spin.
defrag utility?
Well, and it's funny, the save icon. I'm like, there's a whole generation of people that just see that as, they don't know that there's a little disk there, and that's why it's the save icon. But it's just the save icon forever.
Yeah, and you used to have to make sure you went back and clicked it, and now most stuff is just
Uh,
auto-saved.
and then you'd install a program and you get a stack of floppy disks and you just put in one at a time. But so it kind of just seems like that. Like again, it's the thing that interests me is when you kind of were explaining it to me there, and I'm just like, it seems like all this should just be built in and kind of be naturally, and it's just not the way it works. So if you're like me and you didn't know that that's not the way it works, then this would be kind of a great tool to go through and do it. And the best part of this for me is that it's all command line interface. So, like before we got on, I was talking to Dave. I'm like, it's great because I need to understand how it works because I don't ever want to be that guy that just lets AI do everything. But I don't need to understand how to actually use it because I'm going to get Claude to do that. I'm going to go,
Yeah.
okay, Claude, you go and figure this out for me. But this is the tool, and explain to it what you want it to do, and then I set up a scheduled task. That's one of the hugest things that I think has been released now. So now if it has this, you have this ability to do it and you have a scheduled task and just wake up periodically and while you're sleeping or on the weekends or find a time you're not using your computer and just take care of it for you.
Yeah, so that's exactly how I designed it for scheduled tasks, for running in a batch file automatically. So you
Hmm.
don't have to go click a button or configure a whole lot. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is really I just I love when I create a really tight process that
Hmm.
just works well. I really love that. So, yeah, I haven't quite decided how to give it away, on the site yet. I've got some MaveKit users that are testing it and are like, "Oh, yeah, this is way better than we were doing before. This is the right way to do it." Um, so the other thing I started thinking about this after actually our last episode when we were talking about delisting and one of the traders I'm coaching, uh, saw that IQ Feed doesn't split adjust their intraday bars. So
Okay.
as I got to thinking about this, I was like, well, as from our conversation last time, let me see if I can figure out a way to get split adjusted data. What we talked about, it's not absolutely necessary, but it's a cost benefit analysis. Maybe the trade-off now is worth doing. Like it's
Because
probably
I
easier to do
never,
that.
yeah, again, if you missed the last episode, we just had debate about whether you should include delisted or not, and I never thought about that. I just never, because that to me is even a way more compelling argument than delisting, because more of the things that you could potentially day trade are going to be those chunky names that did reverse splits and now all of a sudden they're in play again, and then before they kind of drift their way back down to zero and delist again. I was actually on a stream earlier and we found one company that if you look at the split adjusted price, the all-time high was $160 billion a share. And because it's done so many
Yeah.
delistings kind of on it. So yeah, it's very common for these lower float and stocks that day traders, not anything that I would swing trade or hold overnight, but they become very, very active for a short period of time because the float shrinks. So all of a sudden, something that may not have been a low float yesterday is now a float now because of these reverse splits. So yeah, didn't think of that. It's
Yeah.
good.
So I've done a little bit of work with Polygon, now Massive. I
Oh
really
name.
like the idea of it. So I was like, well, let me just go explore and see if I can modify this utility to work with Polygon data. And let me just look at the splits. Like, what would it take? So I went and looked at, and there's a very nice splits API that I was like, okay, yeah, this is perfect. I could put a start date, I can put an end date, I can get all the splits. Um, so I've got another utility now that works with Polygon.
Mm.
And I actually like this. I like this one better. I got to be honest. And there's a very good reason why. There's several good reasons. So this one, there's another mode. There's the backfill mode, the default. There's the import mode, but there's with this one there's the adjust mode, and it will automatically split adjust the data perfectly. So, uh,
Mm.
so let's say we run you backfill your data last weekend, right? Now you're running it again. There's been some splits since then. It's going to automatically figure that out, automatically adjust the splits in your CSV file that you downloaded. It's automatically going to know that it needs to import the entire history for that specific symbol now that it's split because you got to have to adjust the historical data. So when you run your import, it automatically includes all the data for the split symbols, but just the most recent data for the ones that haven't split. So it's like the same workflow, the same process, the same automation, and you get split adjusted data. It's
Mm.
perfect. That so
So
I
Why
want to hear.
not?
There's one other thing I want to say about Polygon, but you talk first. I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, yeah, first of all, again, I think the argument for needing split adjustment data is 10 times delisted data for day traders for the reasons I described there. But um, if you can do it for Polygon, can you also do it for IQ feed, or is it just
I've asked them, so you can get some split data, but not all split data with IQ feed, unfortunately. And I want to talk to Trent about this because I think I think it's an issue. So you can get the most recent 2 splits. Well, one thing I noticed when I did this with Polygon, just how many freaking splits there are.
I was about to say, and if you can get the most recent 2, like we joked about that company that was worth $160 billion a share. If you're a company that has to reverse split, you're probably a company that has to do a lot of reverse splits.
Yeah.
If you're a company that's doing normal splits, an Apple or Chipotle, or you're doing once every couple years, 10 years, even maybe. But these garbage companies that are doing reverse splits, it's usually reverse split, crash, reverse split, crash,
Yeah.
reverse split, crash. Because now that I'm thinking about it, that's, could be the birth of a trading strategy once you get that data in, is you could say, okay, what happens the day of a reverse split or the day after a reverse split, or, gaps happening because of reverse splits, things like this, where, yeah, so that was and selfishly, I was asking that because I'm like, do I want to switch back to, you just pulled me away from Polygon to IQ feed, but now this is interesting to me. So do I
Yeah.
go back to Polygon?
Well,
And I hope
here's
not.
another thing that I discovered and didn't even dawn on me about the way Polygon does this. So when I first looked at Polygon for this, I tried to match the same way that it works in IQ feed, where you go through each symbol
Mhm.
and you request the historical data for every symbol, and you pull the data back, put it in the CSV file. I started doing that with Polygon. I was matching the same way, but I realized it was going to take a long time to complete, like over 30 hours to do that first one, which I was like, man,
Oof.
there's probably a better way to do this.
Yeah.
And it's because they're rate limiting you. Like once you make a certain number of requests, they're like rate limiting you, so you can't make that many in a certain amount of time, which makes sense. I mean, they're scaling their business.
Well, and they don't want one guy to
Right.
crush everything for everyone else. Yeah.
So, but the way they have these set up, they have these flat files where a flat file and is created each day that they make available to you, and it has every single minute bar for every single symbol that traded that day. So what that allows you to do is download one file. It's a pretty big file, but it's one
Hmm.
file, and you can see everything that traded in there. So the reason that this is like I said, didn't dawn on me till I started doing this. You it's all you get all the delisted stocks automatically with this process. You don't have to do anything else to get delisted data
Mm.
because it's capturing every trade for that particular day. When you go back in time, you're seeing you can go back years, you're seeing a file that has every stock that traded that day. So you don't even have to give it a symbol list. You just say, "Go give me all the trades." It figures out the symbol list and imports them automatically to Amber Broker, and it's all the delisted data is all in there. It's all split adjusted. It's perfect.
So now you're going to make me switch back. So what now you're tasked with, now that you're making me switch back, is to make this process insanely simple for boneheads like me, in which not just getting the data down and kind of put together, but getting it up into Amity Broker, and how to
Yeah.
use that. Because that to me, now and it's kind of cool that, right, people that have listened 44 minutes into the podcast, this is the kind of thing that bursts interesting trading strategies, where just a random conversation about whatever. And now I'm really interested to get into, which might be completely nothing, just playing around reverse splits. And is there a strategy to create just around reverse splits and I guess uplisting, downlisting? I guess you could look at things like that too.
Yeah.
But that's something that it wasn't open until just now. And if you're listening how hard it is to get all of this kind of data, then it might not be an edge that is super exploited yet,
Yeah.
because who has access to that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that angle actually because I was just thinking about, okay, how do I get this data so it's adjusted and it makes sense?
Mm,
But yeah, it's keeping track of all the splits. So there's a file in there that has all the splits. It's got, the ratios. And so here's what I would do. You would run a back test like you normally would. You have all your MapeKit columns there.
hmm
Um, Before you run it up to the cruncher, you can merge with this splits file and say,
hmm
okay, add another column for was today a split and what was it? Like have another one for the ratio.
Yep.
And then you could totally optimize on that. I hadn't thought about that, but you could totally do that with this process. That's cool.
That's interesting. So yeah, now I want to go back to, and Polygon's cheaper too if you don't need the real time data. So you're saving a bit there. Not that that's I went down that road before. It's not worth it to save a couple bucks. But the reason I did switch over was just the pain of the backfill. Now, the kind of other elephant in the room is that if you're doing it with Polygon, the other thing that we've kind of warned people against is having a different provider for real time and historical data. Is that still an issue you worry about?
Like, okay, I promise I did not tee up this question for my
No,
client. I did not tell him this before this, but just this morning, I've been working on an Amber Broker plugin for
hmm
Polygon. And just this morning, I got it working in like a very alpha test, but I've got it working. And right now, I'm going to sort of stress test it, see how many symbols I can add. But yeah, I've got that working now, so that solves that problem. And I kind of like. I mean, the one thing about it is you don't have to install any software.
mm,
You don't have to have a data manager running. It's
hmm
all online. So I I'm liking where this is going. And like I said, I promise I did not tee that up for Michael.
and we are not sponsored. If you do want to, back up a truck worth cash, maybe, but yeah, this is all just, and it's funny because this is how, I can't stress this enough that most traders out there are not thinking about stuff like this. Most traders out there that you see online or that you talk to or whatever, they're just worried. They're scanning through charts to try to figure out the next symbol, that the next stock they want to buy, and that's what they're spending all of their day doing. And looking back on how much I did that throughout my career versus what I'm doing now, it just seems like this is just such a more important question that will yield way more future results. Um, because who cares? I don't know what stocks I bought today. I think I've taken like 10 day trades today. I have no idea what any of them are or what they do. Um, because you're starting to think about stuff like this instead. You're not thinking about that day to day. So, I guess we'll cycle back when you get real time data, maybe. In the meantime, I might be going back, put my credit
Yeah.
card back in Polygon for a bit.
Yeah. I mean, the whole exercise has been pretty eye opening for me. One thing I want to do is, like I said, I was shocked how many splits there were. And I was shocked how
Mm,
many crazy ratios are out there that have happened. I mean, I could not believe it. So I'm going to post something to my mailing list soon, just with some summary information, like how many symbols have split over that period. It's a huge number, like way more than
mhm,
you would guess. And just some interesting statistics that I've come across about, what's the most common split ratio? What's the most common reverse split ratios? How often do the reverse splits happen? Uh, like there's all sorts of stuff that I can think of that I think would be interesting to look at just because That's the other thing this utility does. It writes a log file so you can go see exactly what it does. You can go
Hmm.
back and piece stuff together. So, yeah, I'm deep into this, and while I'm in here, I'm gonna uh, create some stats, some summary stats for people to look at. I think it'd be interesting.
Cool. Well, yeah, that's awesome. So, listen, you definitely, if you're listening to this 50 minutes in, you definitely are a nerd. Congratulations. If you didn't know before today, you just listened to a 50-minute podcast about data backfilling for systems trading. So,
Gosh, we're just
congratulations.
getting started. We could go 2 or 3 times as long, I think.
Good. Well, once we get, we'll circle back and see how this update goes because I'll be definitely diving into it, this weekend and things like that. But as always, I'm Michael Noss.
And I'm Dave Mabe. Talk to you next week on Line Your Own Pockets.